Since we're breaking this message up into two, but the circumstances remain the same for both the two different groups that we're going to find in this church, I want us to do a little bit of a review. Also, there may be some folks who weren't here last week, and I think it's important that you see the broader context. And if you remember, when we go back to verse 18, that Jesus was writing to the church at Thyatira. And his church was a little different from other communities that we read about in our studies in the book of Revelation here in chapters 2 and 3. This was sort of a smaller city. It was a blue-collar city. Most people were working. You didn't see a lot of the ruling class here. But in order to work in this community, you had to be a part of a trade guild or a trade union. If you didn't belong to one, you weren't often receiving business from fellow citizens and fellow business people. You needed to be a part of this in order to be successful, to take care of your family, to put food on the table, to feed the mouths of your hungry children. And so it was a vital part of doing business in the community. The problem was that these trade guilds were thoroughly pagan. I mean, they embraced pagan religions. Oftentimes when they would gather together, it was nothing more than a pagan religious celebration. Oftentimes they would take meat that had been sacrificed to pagan idols, and they would serve it as a part of the meals, and every participant in the trade guild would have been expected to partake of that meat. And this created a dilemma for Christians who had sworn fealty to Jesus and had believed that Jesus Christ alone was the only true God and the only way of salvation. And yet they were, to be a part of a trade guild, you were saying that there were other gods that were worth worshiping and heeding and acknowledging. And the official position of the church was that you shouldn't be a part of such kinds of activities. But this really put the Christian in a pressure point. Because just like anybody else, they had daily expenses. They didn't have the government that was going to take care of them. They didn't have wealthy family members who would meet their needs. They had to earn their living. They had to earn their keep. And in order to do that, you had to associate with these pagan trade guilds. And so what do? Do I remain true to Jesus and reject the trade guild? Or do I try to hold to my faith in Christ without disparaging his name, but engaging in these pagan practices? They didn't really know what to do. So it's very important that you understand that context, which we'll get back to in just a moment, in order to understand the message that's being preached to you. Now remember, we have been following a particular outline. We want to hear what Jesus says about himself to each of these churches. We want to do an examination of the Christians that he's writing to, and at the same time examine our own hearts and lives. And when we see that those two things in comparison line up with Jesus, then we can say, okay, we're affirmed in our faith, but if we're not where we need to be after making that evaluation, then maybe the Lord is calling us to start doing something, or maybe do more of what we have been doing in order to be right with Christ. And so we hear about who Jesus is, we find out who we are, and then we get the, so what? What do I do now in light of that evaluation? Now remember, there at the beginning of verse 18, we're not going to spend a long time there, but in verse 18, that Jesus describes himself in some ways. He says, I am the Son of God. A very bold statement, because he's speaking the words of the Son of God. And then he talks about his eyes. He says, I have fiery eyes. He has eyes like a flame of fire. That is, he sees all and he knows all. But also he describes his feet, that he has feet like burnished bronze, which we talked about last week. Gives the picture that he can stamp on and trample out sin, that he is a holy and righteous God, punishing what is wrong that he sees. And I asked